Okay, now we move on to special teams, which is obviously a very important part of a game. Coaches will tell you special teams plays help you win games, so we want to be sure we film those properly. And we're talking, of course, about kickoffs, field goals, and punts, which we're going to do in that order. We're going to start with kickoffs, and before we look at some of the concepts as to how to shoot them, I just want to mention that part of the way that you shoot kickoffs depends on who you're shooting for, which team you're filming for. If a coach has hired you, you want to pay attention to which team is his and you're going to shoot accordingly. In other words, if you are working for the team that's kicking, then you're going to want to hold on these guys a little bit longer after the kick, stay with them, so the coaches like to see how they're blocking, how they're running down the field to cover the kick. If you're filming for the team that's receiving the kickoff, you want to get away from the ball a little sooner. You want to get yourself centered on the returner and the blocking so coaches can watch how they're setting up the return. So that's the main thing I want to talk to you about on camera before we go to some plays. So right now let's go take a look at how we handle some of the kickoffs and some of the fundamentals to shooting them properly. You heard a lot about pre-snap framing in the previous section, and you're going to hear about it more here in special teams. I'm starting with this kickoff because it further demonstrates the need to see detail as opposed to all the players. This is simply too wide, and we don't ever get close enough to see a jersey number. Instead, let's frame kickoffs this way, with all 11 players on the kickoff team present and little dead space behind them. If you'd like, you could even include the first line of blockers on the return team, and this could depend on which team you're shooting for, as I said before, but anything wider than this and you risk losing detail. Let's take this example in a game I shot. And it's important to know here that I'm shooting for the team in white, so it's going to affect how I shoot when they're kicking versus when they're receiving. So here they are kicking, and notice how I keep all of the coverage team in the shot by widening out as the ball travels. Then as the ball descends, I start to push in, although there's no return. Now when the green team kicks off and the white team is receiving, I get to the returner a lot faster, careful to include some blockers in the shot. As the play continues, I push in for more detail, essentially treating it like a running play. Can you guess who we're shooting for in this play? Regardless, it's a good example of how to handle kickoffs. You can zoom out some on the kick, find the returner and blockers, and then push in to center the action. One more example here just so you can get a good feel for how this works. This is a good job by the cameraman keeping as many players in the shot for as long as possible, while also finding the returner and tracking him properly on the run back. This is how it's done. A few extra things to be aware of now. We want to roll at least 5 seconds before the kickoff in the same way we want to roll 5 seconds before a play. It's pretty easy to know when to roll when a team is lined up this way, but what about when they line up like this? Answer: start rolling, because this may happen. The quick surprise kick is something more teams are doing, and in this game, the same team did it twice. If you waited until the players spread out wide before rolling, you'd have missed it. So err on the side of rolling for too long instead of risking missing the kick. The worst case scenario is what happened here. You'll start rolling anticipating a surprise kick, but you'll simply end up rolling and watching the players line up properly. It's certainly better than missing the kick. Let's let this kick play out now, and you can once again see the concepts in play. This cameraman didn't zoom out to see the coverage running down the field, but he got to the receiver and tracked the action accordingly. One thing we can't forget about with kickoffs is onside kicks, and that of course is when the kicking team is going to try to kick the ball 10 yards and fall on it so they can recover the ball and retain possession. And not much difference on the approach. Whether or not you know an onside kick is coming, keep your eye on the ball and be careful not to just automatically widen out or start panning to the kick returner. Leave some room around the ball so we can see players closing on it, and hold long enough at the end so you can confirm who recovered. So now you have the basics for filming regular kicks and onside kicks. But one thing I want to add is not to underestimate this play and not get lazy. It still needs to be done properly, and it can be one of the most exciting plays in sports. Kickoff return for a touchdown gets the crowd amped. It's a lot of fun to shoot as you get that running back and follow him down the field, and people get excited when they see these sort of highlights. So shoot it properly, and you'll have a great reward on the other side if you get a big play. Now let's move on to field goals, and we're going to include extra points in with field goals because it's basically the same thing. We're just going to refer to them all as field goals. And you may be saying to yourself, this is pretty simple. There's not really much I can learn there. But there are a few points that I definitely want to stress to you. And the first one regards the framing of the field goal. Some people think they should always include the uprights in the shot, but when you have a 45-yard field goal, you're going to be filming half the field in order to see the kicker and the upright in the same shot. So we're going to go back to the rule that we learned several sections ago, and that rule is to see as many players as possible but not lose detail. And combining that with what we just talked about with the uprights, if we are filming a 45-yard field goal, there is no way we want to be that wide because even though we see all the players, we're not seeing them in any detail. So depending on where the kick is going from, we're going to use that to determine how to frame the shot. Let's take a look. We'll start with a short kick, and even this close, you'll notice we only see a piece of the uprights. That's because our focus should and always will be the players. Get all 22 in the shot if you can, putting the leftmost player on the left and the rightmost player on the right with no dead space. Then we're going to anticipate the ball being kicked and move with it as we do when a quarterback throws a pass. Pretty simple. In contrast, let's look at a kick very poorly done so you can see the difference. Obviously, we're way too wide, it's unsettled when the ball is kicked, and there's no detail on the player who blocked the kick. Really no excuse for this kind of shooting at all. But again, here's how it should be done. This is framed properly, the camera moves with the ball, and the camera even zooms out some so we can clearly follow where the ball goes in relation to the uprights. And this is something you can do if needed. Once the ball's in the air, the players are no longer the priority. We need to see where the ball goes. So do what you have to do to follow it. This cameraman decided to push in to see the ball up close, while this one zoomed out to keep the players in the shot and see the ball going toward the uprights. But I like this kick. The cameraman widens out to help follow the ball, but the focus at the end of the play is the referee making the call, so he instantly pushes back in. Here's a 41-yard field goal done very well. I personally would push in on the referees at the end of this, but we did have player detail pre-snap, and the ball was followed well. Those are your two most important takeaways. One thing you have to be very aware of is the chance of a block. It's one thing to start moving with the ball, but you have to be sure it actually goes somewhere. This cameraman was doing what he was supposed to by moving when the ball was kicked, but he did notice the block and caught it quickly enough to get back to follow the action. Here's a bad snap that forces the holder to turn into a running back. Treat him like one once this happens. Center him in your tic-tac-toe board and push in some if it adds more detail. You have to be ready and know how to handle any situation. And that's it. Pretty simple concepts. Just make sure you pay attention to your framing pre-snap, make a decision as to whether you should include the goalpost or not, and anticipate the ball being kicked while being prepared for it either not being kicked or being blocked. You can handle it. I'm sure you can. Let's move on to punts now and see how we handle the final aspect of special teams. For punts, there's really only three main points I want to address. And the first one I'm going to just jump right in and talk about, and that is to pay attention to what down it is and know when a punt is taking place. I can tell you firsthand, as it's happened to me, and it's happened to almost everybody who shoots from me, there's been a game and a situation where the cameraman did not know it was fourth down, did not know the team was punting, and framed the shot as if it were a regular run or a pass play without realizing that the punter was 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage waiting for a punt, and he wasn't included in the shot initially. Then the ball gets hiked, it goes off camera, and only then does the cameraman realize that this is a punt and he has to adjust. So please make sure you know what down it is, pay attention to the game so that you're ready for a punt and that you can frame it properly. That's really step one. For step two, we're going to say that we should not include the punt returner in the shot pre-snap. And you can see a perfect example of what I'm talking about right here. This is almost a perfect way to frame your shot pre-snap. We can see that the rightmost player, the punter, is to the edge of the right side of the screen, and the leftmost player here is on the left edge of the screen. The punt returner is actually the leftmost player, but to include him, we would have to be so wide as to be about 50 yards further away, and we would not be able to see any detail. If the kick were blocked, we really wouldn't see jersey numbers of the player who did it. So this is ideal for pre-snap framing on a punt. We do not want to include the punt returner. A better way to illustrate that would be to look at this shot. And this is a shot where the cameraman is obviously too wide pre-snap. There's no reason why there should be 10 yards of dead space here on the left. But you can already imagine what this would look like if we did include the punt returner in the shot. We would be about 20 to 30 yards wider, and the small detail that we have here would be even smaller. We would not be able to see jersey numbers or anything else going on at the line of scrimmage. So this is not actually good framing beforehand, as we saw back in this shot. We're going to let this shot run now to see what happens when the ball is actually kicked, because the dilemma is going to be whether you should include the ball or not to include the ball. My best advice is to make sure that you always have players in the shot. Go a little wider as the ball's in the air, and if the ball leaves the shot, let it go in favor of the players. This is similar to a passing play when we try to get to the receiver and we don't worry about the ball. We're going to watch this again here, and you can see that the ball starts to go high, but once the ball goes higher than the shot, get back down, see the players, and let's see the punt returners lining up to block and the coverage team coming down the field to try to make the tackle. And you can see that happening right here. The punter kicks the ball, we begin to widen out. If the ball leaves the shot, ignore it, push in only on the runner, and treat it like a running play. Let's go to the second clip we saw. The ball is at a low trajectory. We can keep the ball in the shot and all the players. It's a little bit of the best of both worlds, although we don't want to be that wide to begin with. Moving on here, I mentioned that we should always be paying attention to know when it is a punt. We should also be paying attention during the punt. Don't just expect the ball to be kicked. Here's a situation where we have a fake punt. The ball is snapped to the halfback instead, who takes off, and instantly the cameraman must treat this like a running play. So be prepared for that. Also be prepared for this, an errant snap. The ball, as you see, goes over the punter's head. The cameraman instantly pushes in, does the right thing here, finds the ref, and films the safety being called. And don't forget to keep rolling at the end of a punt play in the same way you keep rolling at the end of a running play. Let the play breathe and give us time to see the jersey number of the player who made the tackle. That's pretty much it for punts, and thus that's pretty much it for our section on special teams. So we're moving on now to some of the extras, things like penalties and the scoreboard. I look forward to seeing you in that section.